to how to build your Bloomlord deck, and I'm Henrik from Team FD, and I've been piloting this deck since BT10, and I've placed 7th place with the Bloomlord deck in the Taiwan and Hong Kong 2020 Digimon Championship. So here today I'll teach you what you need to know and how to build your own Bloomlord deck. Important concepts. So counting the opponent's play is the key success for using Bloomlord. Bloomlord as a boss monster itself is actually rather weak. It doesn't have removal, it doesn't have resistance, it doesn't have protection, it's reliant on you swarming your board to actually get any sort of effect. So the main advantage of Bloomlord is actually how explosive and cheap it is to flood the board and then get a one good turn and hopefully win from that. That's why setting up is extremely important. To set up, we basically need just body counts, because Bloomlord's effect and other level 6's effect is dependent on how many suspended Digimon you have. So the more body count, the better. So everything we do is a setup for building body counts. And to do that, we need a very specific stat line, which is 3000 DP and Fairy or Vegetation type. Because our setup cards can only summon Digimon with that specific stat line. So this is our core lineup: BT10 Sunflowmon and BT10 Agitarmon. You'll notice that both of these have a similar effect of suspending themselves or another green Digimon, and then you can summon from your hand a Fairy Plant or Vegetation, which is how you build up your body count. And obviously Bloomlord, because it's the card that makes use of our body count. So what Digitama choices do we have? Argomon gives us memory, but then a big downside, it's actually really hard to use because it only activates during the unsuspending phase. So therefore it means we have to suspended our thing and had it survive the turn to even get the memory in the first place. BB1 gets 1000 DP during the enemy turn, which is anti-meta. It's close to exclusively used for Hydramon to make your Hydramon 14k so that your opponent can't run over it. Gummymon, draw, perfect for the deck. However, it requires your opponent to have an unsuspended Digimon so you can suspend it to trigger its effect. Torikara Ballmon, basically another anti-meta card because it gives you 2k DP. So while Bloomlord typically will already have 14 to 16k DP, if the meta calls for you needing 18k, this is your go-to card. And lastly, Kokomon, the default best Digitama we're going to use. You draw a card when you suspend yourself, which is extremely easy to do in this deck, and usually by turn 3-4, you would have 10 plus cards in your hand, thanks to Kokomon and other draw card effects. On to the level 3s. The bread and butter of this deck, because these are our main targets for summoning with our summoning effects. First we have Mushroomon. He has no effect, but he has 2 cost, which is the only good 2-cost vegetation card in the game. So rather than, if you need a body, rather than 3 costs, you have a 2-cost one. Palmon, another core card of the deck. It is strictly the best searcher in the game. You get to search for 2 cards and not just 1. But the downside is no inherent effect, and the fairy count of this deck is rather low, so usually you only get 1 target. The BT11 Palmon, while also called Palmon, is actually a lot worse than the BT10 Palmon, because while it's draw, it only activates at the start of your turn, which means that this thing needed to survive the turn for you to even get your draw. And then we have Pomumon. Great effect to let you suspend the opponent's Digimon. Only downside would be no inherited effect, but this is a common thing with the level 3s in this deck. Then you have Terriermon, your classic anti-meta level 3. Downside is it is the wrong type, but at least it's green, so you can still evolve over it if needed. And then BT9 Pomumon prevents special summoning with effects. Another anti-meta card, somewhat paradoxical because we need to special summon to establish our board, but Pokemon prevents us from doing so. So when you use Pokemon, you need to be very careful. While it's sort of easy to get rid of it because you can just run it into security or you can evolve over it, but you still need to consider that it's somewhat anti-ing yourself as well. Then you have Cutemon, prevents cost reduction evolutions. It's another anti-meta card, and it being a fairy is extremely beneficial because BT10 Palmon can search it as well, in addition to your main plants. Which is why, as an opportunity cost, it's actually very low because it's only taking up a deck slot. Most of the time, you're just going to get this with Palmon. Downside is it's yellow, which means that you actually can't evolve over it. Then we have a BT13 card, Lalamon. It's a great searcher, searches for plants and fairies, and also a Tamer. One of the very few cards that can search for a Tamer, but then the downside is it requires a Tamer to use the inherited effect or to get the benefit of 2 searches. And it's only search 3 instead of search 4 compared to Palmon, and obviously we can't run a buttload of Tamers, so the targets inherently are far fewer than Palmon's. So let's talk about the level 4s. BT12-13, a great searcher, however has a wrong stat line, and it's a when evolving effect, so you have to commit to the board to use it. Then we have Petaldramon, a hybrid, but the wrong stat line, and it requires you to play a lot of Tamers to consistently use the hybrid benefits. And it's also a 3-cost evolve, which is rather expensive. Then we have Weedmon, aka Red Vegiemon at home, because Red Vegimon's 3-1 stat line is so good. You might want the 5th copy, and Weedmon's the next best option. We do not have a single Digiburst card in the whole deck, so the inherit effect is actually useless. Red Vegiemon, the cheapest statted correct stat line Vegetation card. Most of the decks run 4 of it just because it's so cheap and so versatile. Then we have Sunflowmon, the bread and butter of this deck. Gives you a draw inherit effect, and it has a setup effect of special summoning a plant veggie from your hand. But however, because there's a when evolve effect, you have to play it on board, and you have to suspend yourself, which is effectively asking the enemy to remove it, if you just end your turn like that. Therefore, whenever you go for Sunflowmon, you're basically committing yourself to evolve all the way up to a level 6. Then we have BT11 Vegiemon. Same problem as BT10 Palmon. It's a start of return effect, which means that this thing needs to survive for a whole turn to get the 1 memory. Then we have Yakimon, correct stat line, which makes it a very good target to special summon because it's a blocker, so you can just block and protect your other guys. But because exactly has the right stat line, it's a weak stat line, which means it's just going to block one thing and die. Or in the worst case, your opponent just removes it with some effect, and it can't even fulfill its blocker purpose. Then we have BT13 Sunflowmon, another setup card. You can suspend it to -2 on your fairy evolution, which in essence is only Bloomlord or occasionally a fairy level 5. It has a great inherent effect of reducing 1 cost from the Digivolution if you have a green Tamer, but the downside is you need the green Tamer. Down to level 5s. We have BT2 Argomon, Digisorption. Great effect, because Digisorption helps us manipulate our board to have more suspended counts, and it's a free evolution. And it helps us set up because the inherent effect lets us summon a level 3 Digimon from our hand in suspended. So if you have already 3 suspended guys, e.g. attacking Bloomlord and 2 other suspended guys, you special summon the 4th suspended guy, it will become a 16k Bloomlord with 3 checks. The only downside is this thing is not a very veggie or plant. Then we have Blossomon, freshly limited, just a testament to how good Digisorption for free is. Downside is it has no effect. Then we have BT10-13 Digisorption for 2, so 1 cost, basically. And it's a pseudo blocker, which is somewhat good and bad at the same time, because most of the time we evolve our level 5s, so you're not getting the benefit of a pseudo blocker, but on the occasion off chance you don't, you can redirect your attacks to protect your important targets. Then we have another core card of the deck, Agitarmon. Same effect as BT10 Sunflowmon. Suspend to special summon correct stat line. Vegitation Fairy. Downside is you actually have to play 3 costs to evolve this guy. So unlike the rest of the Digisorption lineup, you actually need a turn to set this guy up instead of just exploding onto the board. Then we have EX3 Antmon, another Digisorption. Also a 1-cost Digisorption, effectively. Because this deck requires so much suspending, sometimes you just don't have enough body counts to suspend. And Antmon gives you a potential to unsuspend itself. So it gives you another chance to suspend it with other suspend effects. Chimeramon. Yes, a white card. Because this deck is so good at vomiting out level 3000 DP fairy veggies, note that even level 4s are 3000 veggie fairies, which means you can have 2 suspended veggie fairies, level 4, and then DNA evolve into Chimeramon, which resets, giving you a body that can attack as well. Downside is you need the setup. This is a payoff 40 setup. Then we have Pismon, another 1-cost Digisorption. Somewhat meta dependent because you don't really need that 1000 DP. Bloomlord himself is big enough. And at the opponent's turn, realistically, it's impossible to get enough suspended bodies to make Bloomlord so big he's not killable. Then we have BT13 Lilamon. A very good effect for setup because it lets you play Yoshino for free. Downside is it's very expensive, an actual 3-cost evolution, and you need to have the Tamer in hand to use the effect properly. But if you do manage to pull it off, you get a great advantage. Onto our boss monsters. BT10 Lotusmon. It's a very good control card because it can suspend the guy, which in this current meta, which is not too bad because there are a lot of on-delete effects, so you might not want to actually kill the guy, you just want to stop it for a turn. And there's a very good resource loop effect for recycling your correct stat line, fairies and plants, and you get 2 memory from it. The one downside, and then a very big downside, is 4 cost with no offensive capabilities, which means that Lotusmon itself cannot be your end board. It must be Lotusmon plus something else. Then we have the core card of the deck, Bloomlord. It's, despite being 4-cost evolution, it's effectively always lower than 4 because you're going to gain memory off its effects, and it's a very strong offensive card because you can get DP and security checks. But it's a 1-turn wonder because you only get the memory once, and it's rather difficult to get another suspended board after the turn where you committed to evolving. Then we have Hydramon, a very good control card because it sends cards back to the deck, so it bypasses all the on-delete effects, and it forces your opponent to pay memory for each other suspended correct stat line card. But the big downside is it's a 5-cost evolution, and it's hard to utilize because after the first evolution where you get the effect of suspending an opponent's Digimon, you need to find some alternative method to suspend things again. And because the payoff you get from this card is directly proportional to your setup, a very clunky card. Then we have one of the new boss monsters, Quartzmon. It's a great control card, and it's effectively never 6 cost, because you're going to evolve it after you committed to your Bloomlord and you have vomited a whole bunch of bodies into the board. So you're going to gain some memory off this guy. Bloomlord is very good because it counters decks that relies on suspending Tamers. First of all, they might not be even to remove Quartz because all their Tamers were suspended, so their game plan got botched. Even if they did remove it, because Tamers generally only unsuspend during the unsuspend phase, by the time they could remove it, they already passed the unsuspend phase, meaning that they can only continue on their game plan on the next turn. Then onto our utility cards. First option we have is Smashed Potatoes. Great card for cheating memory. All our level 6s are 4 cost or above, so you're always getting full value of Smashed Potatoes. But essentially, it's hidden potential at home. So now onto the most important and broken card in the whole game, Hidden Potential Discovered. Cheats out an evolution, helps us suspend our board as well. All upsides, no downsides, which is why it's limited to 1. Then we have Dimensional Scissors. Because Bloomlord on evolving has piercing, it pairs very well with Dimensional Scissors. You could also use it on Quartzmon to trigger Quartzmon's security destruction effect. It's not once per turn, remember? Downside is it's 3 memory. It means that you have to actually do your whole Bloomlord and Quartzmon evolution, and then still have 3 memory left to use this card, which is somewhat difficult. Then we have a removal card, Grant the Soul. Great removal, essentially 6 costs because you will most likely have 2 suspended guys, but still 6 cost removal is still expensive. Then we have our setup cards. Green Memory Boost, very self-explanatory. One of the best setup cards, gives you memory, gives you searching, but 3 costs is somewhat expensive because it's equivalent to just hard summoning a level 3 Palmon. Then, in the later releases, we're going to have Agility Training, the new set of memory boosts, which are 2 costs. It's basically Memory Boost Light because it's cheaper, it pays for its own cost. You get -2 cost devolution. However, it only digs 2 cards deep, so it's less helpful when you're searching for a specific card, but just a generic setup card. Then we have BT1 Mimi, the 3 memory tamer. A great effect of allowing us to manipulate our Digitama zone. But then, why we don't play 4 cost tamers that much is because 4 cost is really expensive. We basically never want to play it from our hand, which is why we run limited copies. Then we have a BT13 card, Yoshino, another 3 mem tamer. You can suspend her when you evolve into a plant veggie, and you can gain 1 memory. So same issue as me of being 4 cost. However, this is actually a 4 memory tamer because you can get 3 from the main effect, and you can get 1 from an evolving effect. And the difference between 3 and 4 is night and day, because the game is designed around you having 3 memory. So whenever you can go past 3 memory, you're essentially breaking the game. A very simple breakdown of how to play this deck is have Agitaramon or a level 3 in your breeding zone and the body on the board. And when you have enough memory, you push out from the breeding zone, evolve or use Agitaramon's effect, and then you'll have 3 to 4 bodies, which you can then make use for your Hydras and Bloomlords and Quartz. Which is why it's extremely important to find a good turn to establish some sort of board presence by just hard summoning a level 3. Or else you're never going to have enough body counts on the board to make good use of the Bloomlord effects. And that's it for today, and hopefully BT14 will still be playable for our Bloomlord deck. Well, thankfully, the main line green cards, Palmon and Lalamon, are all fairies and plants and vegetation. Hopefully this deck will continue to get great support.